in line with my research objective. So there are cases where, because something funny about students is you just keep on writing stuff that you think are great. You don't know the implication of what you're writing until you get to a different chapter and you are stuck. So what if your objective was not like that? I think there is an example here. So let's say there's another individual who is considering the effects of government health expenditure, okay, on Nigeria's economic development. The effect of government health expenditure on health on Nigeria's economic development. Now the research question of this person, okay, is looking at how does government health, or let me say the research objectives, okay, but let me mix them up. Research objective states at the end of the research what are you expecting to find. Then research questions, we ask questions based on what you've said in your research objectives. So this person's research objective is to find how do I put it now? Okay, effects of government health, expenditure and economic development is to find the relationship between government health expenditure and Nigeria's economic development. So that's the simple objective. So what are the research questions? Research questions are: how does government spending affect Nigeria's adult literacy rate? Okay, because adult literacy is an aspect of development. That's one. How does it affect life expectancy? That's two. And how does it affect poverty, okay, in the country? So that's three. So this person is trying to look out for or watch out for how the effect of government spending on three aspects of economic development: adult literacy rate, life expectancy, and poverty. Okay, so now it's trying to tell us that the first model for this person is going to be adult literacy as a function of government spending, government health expenditure, let me say GH, government health, GHE, health expenditure. That's to answer the first research question. And the second one was talking about life expectancy. So you can say life expectancy is a function of government health expenditure. Then you have poverty as a function of government health expenditure. Alright, so from this person's research objective and research questions, you can see that the number of models that this person is going to be having in chapter 4 is 3. Okay, not 1 over there. And this person would have to build each model in line with what we've done here today. So you start with a theory that you've chosen according to social theory. Now this person is going to be using economic development theories, not adult literacy theories, because your broad dependent variable is economic development, so you can't look for development theories. So according to social development theory, so economic development is a function of this and this and this. Then you find a way of bringing in government expenditure. From there you add other variables. From there you specify the econometric form of the model. If you are interested in logging the model, you mention that. That's just for the first one. You do the same thing for the second one, you do the same thing for the third one. So as you are writing your research objectives, you are writing your research questions, just understand that they have implications. Okay, there are things that are going to happen because of those things that you're writing, further into your research. Okay, so yeah, that's that. Now this is not the end of chapter 4. Okay, so from here you also talk about your estimation technique. So I think that's what is next. Yeah, you talk about your estimation technique and what are the tests you have to carry out, and you also talk about definition and measurement of variables. So let's go into our estimation technique. For me, okay, I would prefer to use autoregressive distributive lag. So estimation technique would then fall under, I'm done with section 4.1, would then fall under 4.2 estimation technique. So what estimation technique do I want to use? I want to use ARDL. Okay, so if I'm using ARDL, what does ARDL entail? So we just kind of summarize it. So what's ARDL? I'll talk about it. Why am I using it? Okay, why am I proposing to use ARDL? So we're just talking about the yardstick for using ARDL to estimate, my econometric model. Okay, and there are two reasons basically. So one is the fact that my data, the data I'm going to be using, to estimate, my APRI, no, sorry, my proxy variables. Okay, so the data I'm going to be using to proxy all of these variables are stationary at levels. It's a mix. Okay, some of them are stationary at levels, some of them are stationary at phase difference. Okay, and ARDL is all about that. So when you have, so you're looking at two things. Okay, stationarity, and then I'm trying to see if there's a long run relationship between my dependent variable and my independent, like the major one. Okay, I want to see if inflation has any long run effect on economic growth, right? So that means I'm not just interested in the short run, I'm also talking about the future in the long run. So based on my estimation, so what am I going to write concerning ARDL? So I'm going to write what ARDL is about, like just a summary. It's not meant to maybe 5-6 lines. Okay, so what does ARDL entail? Then what is it used for? Okay, what's the ARDL estimation technique used for? On what basis is it used? That is, why is it being used? Then what is the model specification? What is ARDL model specification? So for that, you need to just go online to get the model specification. You go online, then you're going to find an equation. So you replicate that equation in your chapter 4. Now ARDL has this kind of long model specification like that, so you just have to adapt it to your own model. Alpha 1, alpha 2, then some of this, some of that, some of when I say some of this, what I'm trying to talk about, some of this, some of that, like that. So it's not a difficult thing. So just go on YouTube or go online, ARDL model specification. So you see the restricted ARDL model specification, and then you're going to come across the unrestricted ARDL model specification. So look at it, how is it being written? Okay, and then adapt it to represent your set of regressors and regressand. Alright, so that's about that. Now, the use of ARDL estimation technique requires that you test for two things. Now, I was saying it that ARDL is looking at, okay, are your variable stationary at levels of phase difference? So for you to know that, you need to carry out a unit root test. Okay, and that is why after 4.2.1 under estimation technique, you are going to include another section, 4.2.2, talking about unit root test. Okay, so the same thing. What is just a brief summary of the unit root test? So what is it about? What are its strengths? Why are you using it? And then what is the model specification for unit root test? So it's not something you should be wrapping your brain about. Just go online, alright, then go and look for I think the biggest deal there is the model specification for unit root test. I think that's just a single line. Most of them are single lines. Not a single line. So you just take it, put it in your projects, or your chapter 4, your chapter 3, as the case may be, and then you move on. Now the other thing is you use ARDL to check long run relationship between your variables. And what makes you to know if there's a long run relationship is bounds test. Okay, so after 4.2.2, then you have 4.2.3 bounds test. The same thing. What is bound test about? So why is it being used? What is the model specification for bounds test? Alright, so that's about that. Now depending on you, you might decide to use another estimation technique. You want to use VAR, you want to use vector error correction model, which is VECM. You want to use whatever you want to use. So what is the justification? On what basis do you use whatever estimation technique that you've chosen? So then how do you test? Now I've told you mine is I'm looking for stationarity of a particular kind, I0 and I1. Okay, what I'm trying to do is to avoid I2. Okay, I don't want my variables to be stationary as I2, that's second difference. So if any of my variable happens to be stationary at second difference, that means I can no longer use ARDL. And that's talking about my chapter 5. So after carrying out my unit root test, I realized that, let me say, inflation is stationary at second difference, which means I can no longer use ARDL. ARDL it's either this or this, or maybe a combination of both, but not I2. So you also look at, okay, I want to use this estimation technique. So how do I test to use, what do I test, what do I look out for in order to be able to use this estimation technique. So whatever you are going to look out for will determine the test that you have to carry out in chapter 4 in your methodology chapter. So mine is unit root test and bounce test. So yours might not be unit root test and bounce test. So you need to really know about your estimation technique, very well. So all of these things are stuff that you do on eViews and analysis, data analysis software like eViews. I think I'm used to eViews, right? So you can decide to use eViews still or just eViews still, like that's the name of an Apple. Yeah, you can still decide to use eViews. That's what I mean. And you may decide to use another software that can help you to carry out your regression using whatever estimation technique that you've chosen. So that's all about that. Now, table 4.1, definition and measurement of variables. So I don't know if this is peculiar to all form of research. I don't know if all supervisors are crazy about this, but the table is just a summary of your variables. Alright, so and in that summary you have variable symbol, you have variable type, variable definition, and your APR expectation. Something else might be included into it, so depending on your supervisor, project type, or whatever. So like I said, it is a summary. So here you have variable symbol GDP. Okay, I'm starting with GDP, so I'm going to do that for all of the variables that you have. So whoever looks at the table can know all of your variables in your chapter 4 straight up, and know whatever it is that the person is supposed to know. Just a summary and overview. Now type, GDP is a dependent variable. Okay, now definition. Okay, definition, there's a way I wrote it. Nigeria's GDP measured in constant $2010. Nigeria's GDP measured in constant 2010 dollars. So that's already talking about what the variable is about and my proxy variable. Okay, for that. Now, as my APR expectation, GDP is a dependent variable. So there's no APR expectation like here. It's a dependent variable. Okay, did you see any alpha beside it? No. So that's just it. Now the next one is inflation. Okay, inflation. I've jumped though. I'm supposed to write innovation, whatever, but it's just something I want to write about. So inflation is an independent variable. All right. So what is the definition? So that's Nigeria's inflation rate measured through changes in GDP deflator. That's the definition. Okay, so Nigeria's inflation rate. This is capturing Nigeria's inflation rate that is measured through changes in GDP deflator. That's all about that. Now, what's my APR expectation? So, do I expect inflation to be positively related, negatively related, or not related at all? Right. So, I'm going to add that here. So, I'll do the same thing for you. It depends on you. So, for me, I expect it to be negative. Right? You don't need to give the reason. So, inflation is expected to have a negative relationship with Nigeria's economic growth. You're done. All right. So, I didn't talk about alpha naught. So alpha naught, you also have to there should be an APR expectation class for alpha naught, and for me, it might be positive, it might be negative, right? So it depends on the strength of your argument. So for me, I could say that there are other, the impact of alpha naught is okay, if every other independent variable in this model were equal to 0, what is the amount of GDP you are going to have? So that's the implication of how to interpret alpha naught. So if alpha 1, alpha 2 to alpha 5 are 0, that means all of the other variables clear out. You only have alpha naught. So what is the data? How do you interpret that? Okay, so for me, I would say they are positive. There are strong, positive factors responsible for a country's GDP, which are not included in this model. So factors like political stability. Okay, although I don't know how to measure that. So factors like security, factors like a vibrant stock market, factors like an efficient banking system. So if those things are existing in Nigeria, and efficient, there's security, there's consumer confidence, there's a high level of investors confidence, we have a vibrant stock market, we have this, we have that. So if there are really strong factors like that, so I may then say, because of these other factors that are not included in this model, right? If every other independent variable in this model were 0, I expect GDP to be positive. Okay, so which is the value of this. Now, because Nigeria is a country that is funny, okay, someone else might say that there are factors that there are strong factors that negatively affect Nigeria's GDP. So factors like insecurity, factors like political instability, factors like a non-vibrant stock market. It depends on your line of argument, okay, and where you're coming from and what is happening in the country. So because of that, the person expects that outside the variables that have been included in this model, okay, GDP would be negative. That is, there's going to be a fall in Nigeria's economy. That Nigeria's economy is not going to grow, to continue to shrink and decline. So it depends, right? And another person could come and say that there are a mix of factors that are affecting Nigeria's economic growth, outside of all of the independent variables that have been included here. So you mentioned some of them. Some that can positively affect Nigeria's economic growth, some that are negatively affecting Nigeria's economic growth. So after mentioning all of them, you then say that the imperial expectation is ambiguous. Okay, so for alpha naught, you expect your alpha naught is ambiguous. That is, you are not certain if it's going to be positive or negative because of all of these opposing factors. Positive factor here, negative factor here. Just mention some of them. So it depends. Now you may, after a regression, this might be negative, this might be positive. It can't be zero. I don't think it's going to be zero though, because it's your intercept. Okay, so or maybe it can be zero. I don't know. What do I know, right? What do I know? So that's not about that. After your table, they then talk about your source, because they are talking about a different thing now. So the source of your data. When do we stop? 4.2, 4.3. Source of your data is going to be your 4.3. Okay, 4.3 source of your data. Source, maybe data source, anyhow. So here it's talking about the places where you're going to get your data from. So is it from World Development Indicators? Is it from CBN Statistical Bulletin? Is it from Nigeria Population? Is it cancelled or something like that? MPC? Is it from National Bureau of Statistics? Whatever it is from, depending on your country. I don't know what country you are gonna be from. I don't know what country you are going to be watching this video from. So it depends on the data, sources in your country, where you think you can get the data for your variables, right? So you include that. You also talk about the kind of data that you want to get from those sources. So for example, I'll be looking for GDP deflator data. So I'm going to include it here. The data that I'm going to be the source of my data is World Development Indicator, so WDI. So if there's another one, I can include it. Maybe WDI and NPC. Okay, WDI and MBS. That might be all, right? Then the next, I'm going to talk about data I'm going to source from. The data to be obtained include real GDP, GDP deflator, real GDP in constant $20, life expectancy, okay, data, then patents, okay, the number of patent data, or research and development expenditure data, and so on and so forth. So that's that. Is there something else? Kind of data, type of your data source. Okay, so is it primary data, is it secondary data? So you talk about that. So it's a very short, aspect of sometimes maybe 4 lines. You're fine. Yeah. So with this, I hope you've been able to understand what methodology aspect is all about. One of the most important thing is your model specification in this chapter. So with what we've done today, your assignment is then going to be for you to use the guidelines that you've learned from this particular class to write your own methodology, your research methodology. You've been working on your projects apparently by now. So right now it should be your chapter 4. So whatever you've learned here, use it, to build the chapter 4 of your own research as well. I'm not going to give you a word limit because apparently, looking at it, it's not so broad, it's not so much. So you should be able to bring yourself within reasonable word limits. So here is not essay type like others. So it's more or less, what you are looking for. So straight to the point. Yeah, straight to the point. So that's about that. And now let's start to be talking about analysis. Chapter 5. You see, we're almost done with project writing. Then chapter 6, we talk about discussion of findings, policy recommendations, limitations, suggestions for future research, then we can just talk about your project defense. Yeah, so that's all about that. See you in the next class. Thank you for watching this video.